Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Meet the Execs. I'm your host, Brandon Pankey, and I'm super excited to be with you for another week. Happy Friday to everyone listening. Make sure you're following and subscribing to BlackStream Live. We are powered by Windows and Intel Evo. With Windows and Intel, you have more ways to work your way so you can do whatever it is that you're inspired to do. I've got my Lenovo right here. It's powered by Intel Evo. I'm ready to look at your comments. Make sure you're in the chat. Make sure you're listening because today's guest is absolutely phenomenal. Someone that honestly, I think I look up to a little bit because she's that special at what she does. She is the Executive Vice President of Content and Strategy with Jesse Collins Entertainment. Please, I am beyond esteemed to welcome Dionne Harmon here. If you can, and I do this with all of my guests, really walk us through that journey, how you got to be the Executive VP of such an esteemed entertainment company. I mean, where did you start, and walk us through how you got to where you are today?
Okay. Well, it is a long story with a lot of twists and turns. So I will give you kind of the truncated version. But it all started, I did not plan to be in the entertainment industry at all. I moved to LA. I was interviewing at consulting firms and investment banking firms. And I, was out, and someone came up to me and said, "Hey, do you want to be on this dating show called Dismissed on MTV?" And I was like, absolutely not. Right. And they kept hounding me. And I was like, "Here, take my phone number and leave me alone." And that person called me on the following Monday, one of my best friends to this day now. And I said, "I still don't want to do your show." And he said, "Well, why don't you come work for us? Like, we want to bring more diversity to the show. You can be a casting recruiter." And I was like, "What is casting?" Like, I had never even heard of it. And right. They asked me to come down that day for an interview. I went down to 2600 Colorado. I interviewed and I got the job, and it was $550 a week, working for MTV, being a casting recruiter. And that really changed the direction of my entire life. And so fast forward, I casted 3 seasons of Dismissed. I did Becoming, I did Want to Come In. And after kind of doing the casting stuff, I also cast a bunch of music videos with Chris Robinson, which is a very fun full circle story. But like, let's see, Trade It All, Pass the Cavassier, wow. Basketball, Bow Wow. There were some Usher ones thrown in there, but I worked with Visionary Casting doing that. And once I got out of casting, I started working more on the talent side, and I spent some time at Fox King working for Marcus King and Jamie Foxx's production company. I worked for Vince Sorincione, who represented Halle Berry and Taraji Henson, another crazy full circle sort of thing, and ended up at OWN. And I was a part of the team that launched the network there. And so we basically were responsible for developing, 24 hours of content for that network. Cut to this whole time I was DJing, right? So I was like DJing on the side at this is a part
I'm learning
of the story.
So much. I'm learning so much. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know, I'm surprised we haven't had these talks, but I started DJing when I first moved to LA, and it was something I was doing on the side. Really crazy story is, I don't know if you know Diallo Riddle, but he is a writer. He created Sherman Showcase, like all that. He's a DJ too. We went to Harvard together. And when I moved out here, he gave me my first DJ gig at the Standard Hotel in downtown LA. I was a resident DJ there for 9 years. I was at Bar Marmont for several years, Hotel Irwin, Viceroy, Ace Hotel. Like, I did all of these boutique hotels. So when I was at OWN, I had the opportunity to DJ in Paris. I wasn't able to do it because I had to work, But I told myself if that opportunity ever came up again, I would take it. It came up again, and I'm pretty sure I asked for the time off and didn't get it. Maybe a little hazy. Ended up putting in my 2-week notice, went DJ'd in Paris, and it was probably DJ'd full time for like a year and some change after that. I got a phone call while I was DJing full time, waking up naturally. My only responsibility, coming up with music that I was going to play. And they said, you should meet this guy, Jesse Collins. He's looking for an assistant. And I was like, I haven't been an assistant in a while. Like, nah. And they were like, no, you have to meet him. You know, he produces the Grammys and the BET Awards, and it's all this music stuff. It's a perfect blend of what you do. And I was like, all right, I'll meet him. So I go, and the first person I met with was the office manager, and she was like, rolling calls, scheduling, all of this. And I was like, nope. And somehow they wanted to see me for a second interview. I fought that, but they said, did you meet Jesse? And I said, no, I didn't. I met the office manager. And they were like, just go meet Jesse. Cut to, I'm interviewing with Jesse. We bond because he was also a DJ. He was a DJ on the radio in Ocean City, Maryland, and then later in LA on Ruthless Radio for Eazy-E. So we had a whole DJ conversation. And, you know, there's also like a freedom that you have when you don't need a job, where you could just be like really honest in an interview. And, you know, I was like, look, this is where I am in my life. Like, this is what I'm looking for. I don't want to be an assistant. Like, I'm in my early 30s. Like, I'd like to, you know, do more. And he said, listen, the reason I like you is because you have done more, and I need like a right hand. I need you to do the assistant stuff, but also someone that can help me with everything else. And he was like, just give me like a year, 2 years. I'll teach you everything I know, and we'll figure it out. And I was like, But something in me was like, this is the move. And I took the job. That was 9 years ago. I was his assistant. He kept his word, taught me everything, let me sit in on meetings, listen to all of the calls, and just really learn from him. Janae Roseanne Clay was there. She was also his assistant previously, now an EP with me on all the specials. You know, just really soaking it all up. And I would say maybe about a year and a half into that, I realized like we were getting all of these pitches, and we were so busy doing our award shows that we'd be like, oh, this is great. But then it would just go on a shelf. And so I came to him and I said, look, we should develop some stuff. Like, you know, we do all of these awards shows, but like we could be doing more. And, you know, true to Jesse form, if you know him, he's like, well, you know, I can't pay you to develop, but, you know, you can try it. So I said, all right, so we kind of had a 6-month time limit. Let me try this for 6 months and see what happens. And one of the first things I did was dig up an old script that had been sitting on a shelf for years, I think 10 years maybe to be exact. And it was the New Edition story. And, you know, the TLC movie had just hit. It did really, really well. And I was like, we have New Edition. Like, we should go to Stephen Hill. We should pitch this to him. And we went to Stephen. He was like, yeah. And we did that. And that was kind of, you know, a huge jump for us. And at that point, you know, I became director of development, which sounded very fancy, but I was a department of one. And, you know, we just grew from there, you know, and we, you know, Hip Hop Squares was another, like, one of the first things that I did. And, you know, we had 4 seasons of that, and it spun out into Nashville Squares and, you know, Rhythm and Flow and all of these, you know, comedy specials and different things we started doing. And, you know, also doing more in the scripted space, brought Andy Horn on to kind of run our scripted. And, you know, today, trying to think, how many people do we have in our department? I think we have 7 people in the department now, and we've been able to really grow in different areas outside of award shows and specials, and that's been the journey. And it's just, we've all kind of supported each other and grown together and like jumped into these new genres together, and it's just been a crazy ride. And I am so glad I did not let my ego get in the way and say, like, you ain't no assistant, and not take that job, because it was like taking that, what appeared to be step backwards, was what ended up giving me that like diagonal fast track. I don't know if 9 years is fast, but path to where I am today. So it was still kind of long, but that was still like the short version.
Let me tell you how important it was to hear all that. 2 things. 1, shameless plug, BlackStream Live has a weekly show on Fridays called Go DJ. You and Jesse are always invited. If you ever want to get back into the DJ game, it's up to you. You will always have a slot. That's my word. But
listen,
in all seriousness,
I might take you up on that. I might take you up on that.
Our executive producer of the network, so we can do it. But secondly, and I think it's more important, just to hear your journey. There are a lot of listeners who want to be in entertainment or be in any other sort of industry, and they may feel like, well, I don't know if the route I'm taking is the right route. But to hear your journey, hear your story, you made pivots, and you were a DJ at one point, a casting director at one point, and you are now EVP of content and strategy at a company that I just absolutely respect. And so it's really phenomenal just to hear your story, because I think sometimes people get tripped up and they're like, well, I don't want to be an assistant here, or I don't want to do this job because it's not a great title, not understanding that sometimes you may have to take a quote unquote step back to move 10 steps forward. And it's absolutely amazing to hear that from you. So I want to, you use the word a lot, you talk about development. What exactly is development when you're referring to a scripted or unscripted show?
So development is really just coming up with an idea or taking an idea and developing it into a show. So that can mean a lot of different things. On the unscripted side, let's just say, for instance, with Rhythm and Flow, like it was about figuring out, okay, what is the format of this competition show? What types of contestants are we looking for? What kind of winner are we looking for? What is the journey that an artist would go from discovery to becoming your bona fide star? And how do we translate that into 10 episodes of challenges and experiences? So it also involves finding a showrunner to run the whole show, coming up with a budget, going back and forth with your network to get that in a place where everybody is happy, coming up with the schedule, casting, all of those elements are part of the development of the show, right? And then on the scripted side, I mean, it's the same thing. Someone can come to you with an idea or a log line like, hey, I want to do a movie about a guy coming of age in Kansas. And like, this is the story. And you have to figure out, okay, what are the beats of that story? What are the 3 acts? What is the tone? It's really just not to keep using the word, but just developing it into something that you ultimately end up seeing on TV. And really just a big part of the development, which I totally skipped, was selling it. You have to pitch it and you have to sell it before it can get on TV. So that's a big part of it too. Once you get it to a place where everybody's happy and you're confident in it, then you have to go around and, do the dog and pony show and hope somebody believes in it as much as you do. And then hopefully if you sell it, you know, it becomes something great. So.
Got you. So how do I get to you? I mean, so it has to have structure. It has to be sold. You know, I've got 20 ideas. How do I approach a Dionne Harmon and say, hey, look, you know, here are my ideas. Go sell them. Like, what's your rubric, so to speak, of ideas?
Okay. So I'll tell you something from the school of Jesse, which is
Okay.
that if you have 20 ideas, your best bet when you're pitching to a producer or a production company is to condense that down. You really
Mm,
should be focusing on like one thing, at best, maybe two, maybe, but when people come in and they're like, all right, I have 20 ideas, and you go through, it's like your eyes glaze over, it's too much. So it's really just
hmm.
about kind of picking that one or two things that you're really, really passionate about and that you think are the strongest. And then, you know, finding that company to pitch it to.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of times that happens through an agent or a lawyer.
Okay.
You know, like for JCE specifically, you can't just come up with your idea. Like there is a process. So, you know, you would have to come through one of those channels, and then we'd set the meeting, something like this, till the world opens back up, and then you would pitch your idea. I think that once you kind of build your relationships with certain people, you know, it changes a little bit. Like there are people
Hmm.
that call me and say, hey, here's my idea, just on the phone. You like it or you don't like it? If I like it, we'll come do the formal thing. If not,
Okay.
you know, they move forward. So you want to get to a place where you have these relationships and you can just
Sure.
kind of burn through, you know?
No, absolutely. So let's say, you know, I'm going through the right process. I have an agent. I get contacted to you, Jesse Collins Entertainment. You love the idea. We structure the idea. It's in a great place to go selling. What's the strategy to sell? Do you just have like wide open meetings with different distributors like a Netflix or a Hulu or et cetera, et cetera? Or, you know, based on the material, do you say, all right, let's focus on HBO Max for this one, or let's focus on fill in the blank distributor for this? Like, what's that strategy to sell?
So, you know, it's twofold. It's actually both of what you said.
Okay.
You know, we're represented by CAA, and the agencies, you know, have relationships at all of the buyers, and they know exactly what each network is looking for. So, depending
Okay.
on what your project is and kind of what lane that falls into, then that would narrow down the window of places. So, you bring your
Sure.
idea, and we're like, oh, great. Showtime is looking for something in that space, young
Mm,
adult comedy. And so we know that that is a place that, you know, you have a better chance.
mm-hmm.
You know, it's really just about kind of cueing in on what it is, identifying the brands that are looking for what you have, and then going to
Mm-hmm.
them.
Got it.
So,
Got it. And something you sort of glossed over it as you were speaking, but I want people that are listening, all of the BlackStream Live followers and listeners, understand what Dionne said. Executive producer for Rhythm and Flow, which I know you know, the New Edition story, and also an executive producer for the BET Awards, which we talked about briefly in the beginning. How does something as massive as an award show, because I know Jesse Collins does a ton of award shows, how do you put something like that together? Like, what's the process? How long does it even take to put together something as massive as the BET Awards?
um, that is a process. Let me rewind though, because I want to be clear
Yep.
about my journey. Because when I did New Edition story,
Mm-hmm.
even though I brought that and we got it sold, like I was still Jesse's assistant at that time and just moving
Wow.
into my
Okay.
development role. So I wasn't even an EP. I was far from an EP at that point. I
Gotcha.
started out as a segment producer, which I probably should have told you in the earlier piece, as a segment producer on the award shows, producing packages. So if it was like
Mm.
Lifetime Achievement, Humanitarian Award, I was doing those. And then I grew through all of the roles, associate
Okay.
producer, co-producer, producer, and with each one, gaining more and more responsibility, from producing the packages to producing the Music Matters stage to producing
Sure.
performances to then eventually co-EPing and EPing these shows. So just wanted to be clear on that, because New Edition was super early
For
in my
sure.
career.
But Dionne, hold on.
But for
I don't want to
me,
cut you off. I don't want to cut you off, but you're helping me actually a little bit. So
yeah,
let's back up, because a lot of
okay.
people come to me and, I want to be a producer. And
hmm
you just rattled off about 4 or 5 different types of producers. Can you
Before the producer, yep.
Can you just, as briefly or as long as you would like, just walk through some of those different types of producers? Because I think that's important for people that
Sure.
want to get into this industry, so that they understand it, they can delineate between different types of producers. Super important.
Sure. And I will say it kind of is different for each genre, but for
Mm,
award shows, you know, a segment producer is kind of what it sounds like. You're producing a segment that's a part of the entire show. It's very targeted. So it might be, like I said, my very first package was Smokey Robinson, who was
okay.
getting the Lifetime Achievement Award. And so it's that, or maybe there is a pre-taped skit and you produce that segment only. That's your segment
Mm,
producer. Um, as you kind of gain a little bit more responsibility, there's an associate producer and there's a creative associate producer, but there's also like the more production associate producer, which is dealing with budgets and scheduling the shoots and cameras and rentals, locations, things like that. But on the creative side, you know, you have your associate producer, which still may be doing, uh, packages or something, but maybe now you've also taken on a bigger role in like ad sales integrations, or maybe you're
mm,
helping out with this or with that. It really just depends. And it's more like I said, each person's kind of journey and the responsibilities are not so black and white. But,
hmm
as you grow, you're adding a little bit more to what you
Sure.
do. And, after associate producer, you would be a co-producer. You're really working hand in hand with the producers. Maybe you're helping out a little bit on the performances, but you don't have one that's all yours. Maybe
Okay.
you get a smaller performance, like Music Matters. As a producer, now you're really taking more ownership of the performances. Um,
hmm
you may, generally, there are a few different producers on the show, so we'll divide up the different acts. So you'll get some
Okay.
of those. And then it just keeps growing. After producer would be co-executive producer. And then after
hmm
co-executive producer, it's executive producer. And, as a co-EP and an EP, it's really just full 360 of the entire show. It's what is the theme and through line of the show? How is it structured from act to act? Who's your host? What is the script throughout? What are the
hmm
performances? It really
hmm
is a little bit of everything,
Got it.
holistically. So that is a breakdown of that. So between, I would say, probably 2014 or 2015 to now, you cycle
hmm
your way through those. And then, I've been really fortunate to, be an EP now for a few years, I think. But
Wow.
it all runs
That's
together.
awesome. I hear you on
But
that. Trust me. Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's just all runs. There's so many. I mean, I just did my ninth, eighth BET Awards, or ninth. So it's been a long journey. But you asked about this year's BET Awards
Correct.
and just what it
Correct.
takes to put that together.
Yeah, particularly because, yeah, what does it take to put it together? Particularly because we're still in COVID. Let's just talk about it. Still,
That's right.
and we're on the outliers of the pandemic. It feels like, although there's a Delta variant now, but that'll be a different conversation. What what did it
Yes.
take? Because you had people in the audience now. Just how massive of an undertaking was that? I just want people to understand what goes into something like a BET Awards that is multicast now on multiple networks across Viacom. which is the parent company of BET. So I just want to go into it because I think it's super important for the culture and one of the most important events that we have each year. And it's, to have you be one of the EPs for it is just amazing to me.
Well, thank you. But first, as it relates to COVID, even though COVID was kind of, I think one day the laws changed and it was like, COVID's over, no mask, no nothing, everything's back to normal. That is not how it was for the show. The unions, Viacom, BET, still took and still takes that very seriously. So although I think we were the first music awards show to have a live audience like this, we had 2,000 people. One of the things that was important to BET was that the audience be vaccinated. So if you'll notice, the mosh pit, all of those people were fully vaccinated, which is why they were able to be without a mask and be in closer proximity. We also had kind of a section where we had a lot of our presenters, performers, and nominees. That was treated like any award show, what we call Zone A in COVID speak, where you're required to test, within a certain time frame leading up to the show. They were all, I don't know if you noticed, but it was kind of like this lounge seating, but it was by bubbles. So the people who were sitting together were in a bubble, and each bubble was 6 feet apart from the other bubble. And although you would have noticed people without their mask while we were shooting, the people who weren't vaccinated in that section had to put their masks back on when we weren't shooting during commercial breaks. And then we had the loge section, which was all also vaccinated people. So, that is how we were able to have the audience, the live audience that we did. In terms of producing the show, it was the same as it's been for us the last year and a half. Everyone had to test in order to rehearse, in order to come on set. We were limited in the number of bodies that we could have. In the past, an artist could have 30 people on their credential list. Those numbers were very limited to just the essential people that were needed to execute the performance. So all of those things were happening behind the scenes, even though in front of the scenes, it looked almost like the old days. I mean, you still saw some dancers with masks. You still saw some people with masks. But just know that behind the scenes, all of those things were happening. I will say one good thing about COVID. There are not a lot of them, but the one good thing was that it really challenged us to kind of think differently about how we do the show and how it looks. And, you may have noticed that the stage was different. And that was because we had to adjust we removed all of those seats that are normally in the entire orchestra section. One, to make sure we were compliant with COVID regulations and spacing. But it created something really cool that hopefully we'll continue to do, that round stage with the LED dish and like the way it was all set up. Like we all really liked it, and the artists liked it, the audience liked it. So, that's something we did out of necessity that caused people to push the limits of what we normally do. And it turned out to be a change that we all really loved. So.
No, I love that. I love that. Do you find that, just again, this is about educating the viewers that are listening in or watching. What are your hours like on a day-to-day basis? Like, what's a day for Dionne Harmon? And I know it changes, but just give us, just please.
It really depends on what's going on. If it is, if we're shooting a scripted show, we could have 5 a.m. call times and, go 12, 16-hour days. I would say as with production, it really is, you're kind of in it. And then there are periods where it's relatively quiet, although we're getting kind of less and less quiet time as time goes on, which is a good thing. But, I would say this is a business where, people work a lot. It's like, doesn't matter if it's Saturday, if it's Sunday, if it's 5 a.m., if it's 10 p.m. I feel like there could always be a call, about something. So it's definitely labor intensive, but I love what I do. So it doesn't feel like work. I'm not annoyed on a Saturday if we're rehearsing all day because I'm doing something I enjoy with people that I really enjoy working with. So yeah, I don't want to sugarcoat it and be like, if you're into like getting there at 9 and leaving at 6, this is not the world for you because it really, there are times where, and this, we've done shows together, so this, it really, it can be intense, but the work for me is rewarding. So, but I'm also an early riser, so I get up anyways at like 5 or 6. My personal time to try to get what I want to get done happens early in the morning. Okay. And that's where life stuff happens, like running or reading a book that's not a script, so that morning time is really important to me. That also means I like go to bed early like an old lady, but I usually get woken up to some sort of crisis. But, that's neither here nor there.
Yep. So let me ask, because I think hearing your story, over the past 9 years, have you found, you were brought into this mist in the casting world because they were looking for more diversity. And as a Black woman, have you found just over the course of your growth in the industry, has diversity and diversity hirings been more intentional? Or, is there still a lot more work to be done? I'm just always curious, just speaking to other, Black folks in this industry, in music or in film, where do you think diversity is and how much further do we need to get?
That is a good question. One thing that's been important to me, I'm so happy where I'm at because I am surrounded by people of color, Black people especially, that are just so driven and so creative, so smart, so successful. And that's big for me. Look, I'm originally from Philly, as you know, but I grew up in Dallas. Yeah. I was always one of the few, if not only, Black people in my class, on my cheerleading squad, whatever it was, piano lessons, whatever it was, that's in my neighborhood. And then I didn't, I ended up going to Harvard, which was very similar. There were Black people, there could have been more, so it was another situation. And, moving to LA and kind of getting into this business, whether MTV was a lot, even though what I was hired to do was to help bring diversity to the shows. If you ever saw those shows, you'd have to be a little bit older. It's still, there weren't a lot of us. Right. I'm trying to think if there were other Black people that worked on those shows then, and I can't think of any. And then once I started having a little bit more control, like I think it was working on those music videos where I was like, wait a minute, this is different. Where like the casting director was Black, the director was Black, the artists were Black, like the wardrobe people, everyone around. And that felt good. And I think after that influenced me. Like when I worked at Fox King, that was a Black husband and wife team. Marcus and Jamie King working with Jamie Foxx to create content. So that was something. And then working, in support of Halle Berry and Taraji Henson. I had a brief stint at the Kanye West Foundation, going to OWN, which has a diverse a diverse staff, but that's Oprah. And then finally landing at JCE, which has been, the single most powerful influence in my life from the people. Like, I'm amazed at the people that I've met, whether they're at labels or they're at networks or they're creative directors, whoever it is. I mean, you know very well, like people like Sean G, people like Latifah and Shakim Compere, people like I don't want to get into naming a bunch of names because I don't want to like miss people, but Ethiopia, Latrice, like all of these women and men, James Lopez, Will Packer, that are doing all of these amazing things. And to be in rooms with these people and a part of the conversation and creating with these people and then working with the artists, it is so empowering to just see that excellence across the board. And it just shows, Charles King, it just shows what can be done. So I've surrounded myself with diversity, but it's important to me as an executive to make sure that diversity is a part of everything that we do. I've definitely had a side text to Jesse before where maybe we're on a Zoom, a staff meeting Zoom, and I'm like, wait a minute, like I want to make sure that everybody on this staff, like diversity is great, but I want to make sure that we really are giving each other opportunities as well, because sometimes we're the only ones that will. I will say that, after George Floyd, when all of the corporations and networks and everybody felt compelled to, they started creating initiatives to hire Black executives to tell Black stories, things along those lines. I think that's really great. And, I think we have to make sure that we hold all of those people accountable. I think that there have been situations where that you've been hired because you're checking the black box, and that's evident in some of the creative conversations. And, it's really important to like stand your ground and maintain that authenticity and be like, look, you hired me and this is what you're going to get, the Blackness. I'm not going to like do the watered down thing. Like, this is what it is. This comes with it. You don't just get to hire me or us and be like, check, did that, and what we make not be reflective of what we're talking about. So, I think it's important for us to capitalize on what's going on and I'm so sorry, to capitalize on what's going on and to make sure that our voices are heard in those spaces, and that when we're in the room, that, we really stand up for who we are and all of our stories and all of the varied ways that we can be.
You over here. No, it makes sense. If I could tithe, I would, because you over here preaching. You over here preaching. I might Cash App or Venmo you. I don't know yet. I got to figure that out. So, no, but you're right though, 100% right. So I want to lead into this next question, because Windows and Intel Evo are working together, creating devices that are made to inspire. So Windows and Intel wants to know, Dionne, where does your inspiration come from?
That is a good question. My inspiration comes from art and music. That is what drives me. I mean, I'm one of those people that can look at a piece of art and like cry. Like, it really speaks to me, and same with music. And those things inspire me, and they're at the core of everything that I do. If it's a project, I want to make sure that it looks beautiful and it sounds
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And, it's a form of art, no matter what it is. It could
Right.
be hip hop squares, or it could be, the BET Awards or the Super Bowl. It could be any of those things, but I want it to just make people feel something, whatever
Yeah.
the content is, and art and music make me feel something.
I love that. I love that. So before we get out of here, after an amazing, compelling interview, what would you say to the next Dionne Harmon that wants to get into this industry, that's trying to break through? What would your advice be?
Whew. Well, I would say, because I've noticed a big difference between my generation. I was
Mm,
born in the 70s, even though people try to put me in the younger box, but I was born in the 70s.
hmm.
And today's generation. And I think, and I know they've heard this before and they'll probably groan, but there's like this sense of entitlement, and maybe it's because everything is so instant. Like, I remember growing up, if I wanted to find something, I had to go to the library to look it up. Or if you had a World Book Encyclopedia, you could go try to do the research. Like, there's just a different, everything wasn't so quick. And I think, a lot of young people I've come into contact that are so talented just
Yeah.
want to be an EP. They just want to jump straight to EP, and that's fine. You can jump straight to EP, create something.
Hmm.
Like Issa Rae. If you make
Yep.
Awkward Black Girl and you make Insecure, boom, your EP, creator EP, done. But there is a path. And,
Hmm.
just take the path, because you're going to be a better EP if
Yep.
you've done the job of everybody who works for you. Don't
Hmm.
act like things are beneath you. I still move chairs. I'll
Come
still get
on.
lunch or coffee.
Yep. Yep.
If somebody needs a stand-in and I'm around, I'll stand in. Whatever it takes to get the job done. And that's the attitude you need. Like, there are so many people, especially people now, bless them, that if they came to Jesse and said, I want to do development, and he's like, well, that's great, but I don't have money to pay you as the development person, I just have my assistant, then they would have been like, all right, I know my worth, which is great. I'm not saying don't know your
Right.
worth, but what I'm saying is, it's cart before the horse, because so many I've
Yep.
seen people say, when you start to give them more responsibility, they say, oh, well, that's a such and such job, and I'm only this, and if I do that, then I need to be paid this and have this different
Man.
title. And what they don't understand is, you do the job to get the job.
Hmm.
And then when
Yep.
people see, my first co-EP credit came because I was just doing the work, and someone said, Dionne should be a co-EP of this. Like, look at everything she's doing. And that's how I got it.
Hmm.
So it's really just kind of having a little bit of patience, humbling yourself a little, and knowing that there is a path. And to just go on that path and just do everything with excellence, whether it is getting a lunch or if it is producing Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak's performance. It should be the same energy for both of
Yep.
those. And that's
Yep.
the advice I have. You get a lot farther, with that attitude than coming in like, and I'm sure you could do it, but coming in and being like, I should be the EP of this show and da 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 da, then people are going to instantly, be a little turned off by that. So,
Man, I agree 1,000%. 1,000%. Hold on, I want to talk about that for a minute, but I want to make sure we get this poll
okay.
up. After hearing Dionne's inspiring story, Windows and Intel wants to hear from you. Check into the poll, excuse me, that you're going to see right now. we want to know, where does your inspiration strike? Make sure you check on the poll right now. I'm looking at the chat. I want to make sure you guys are really engaged, and you are. So thank you for that. But to Dionne's point, honestly, I'm still, no matter where I'm at in this industry, I'm still giving out tickets, running around festivals, whatever's needed. Dionne alluded earlier that I worked on a project with her and Jesse and Sean G, who's the president of Live Nation Urban. I'm going to be honest, I would have been an assistant on that just to learn and to understand what that project is. And I think that gets lost sometimes. There are, young people that want to, I automatically assume I'm going to be an EP. And I think we're in this microwave sort of era where, okay, well, if I have, X amount of views on YouTube, I've made it. And there's still so much learning that we all have to do. So just, remember that along the journey, because I think what Dionne stated was beyond correct. So
yeah.
awesome.
And if you really are that EP diamond in the rough, that will become apparent really quickly, and you will rise through the ranks. The cream will rise to the top. So
Always
just go
does.
through it, and people will see the work. The work's what speaks for itself. So
Always. The work is what speaks for itself. And that's the way that I think we need to end this interview. Dionne, you are, let me think. And I'm coming up with this right now. Maya Angelou said, I am a phenomenal woman. And that's what you are, Dionne. Okay. Maya was writing about you. Maya was writing about you. I swear to God, she was. Thank you for even making time. I'm humbled. I'm grateful. You're amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, the Executive Vice President of Content and Strategy for Jesse Collins Entertainment. Thank you, Dionne Harmon. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course. I don't know about y'all, but I learned a lot over this past episode. It was amazing to have Dionne on. And again, the work will speak for itself. Make sure that you are working hard and putting in all of the effort you can in whatever you want to do, and you will succeed. That's my word. I promise that's going to happen. Amazing episode of Meet the Execs, powered by Windows and Intel. We're going to be back next Friday, same time. I'm your host, Brandon Pankey. I don't know what else to say. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.